computer. So, Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you. It's all yours.
Thank you. Well, first of all, just let me say it's a pleasure to be here. My name's Tony Rathman. I've been an ITC researcher. Actually, started out in the paranormal, and then realized there was a lot more to this than just what was termed ghost hunting, and that caught our attention. What originally caught our attention when we first started realizing when we were doing EVP work was to be able to get a voice from somebody not in front of you that could answer a question with timing and relevance and intelligence was absolutely amazing to me. And 15 years ago, I was a complete skeptic on anything to do with ghosts, spirits. But when my wife asked me to go on a trip back 2010, Valentine's Day weekend it was. Of course, I went, wanted to appease her, make her happy. She had fun. That was all that mattered to me. But when she got the stuff home and started going through it, the responses it was 3 a.m, we were the only two in the basement of this hotel. There were only two other guests in the entire hotel itself, and nobody was up at 3 a.m in the basement. Where these voices were coming from blew my mind. So that's kind of how we got started. But what fascinated me about a vocal response was that before I even heard the answer, I could tell whether it was male or female. I could tell what language they were speaking. Were they speaking English or a different language? I could tell if they had a territorial accent or dialect. I could tell their emotional state. Were they happy? Were they angry? Were they mad? All of that being handed to me before I even heard the response. That to me was unmatchable to anything else. So that was the path we started on. Now, the other thing about getting a vocal from a source that is not in front of you, that you're not aware of where it came from, where it originated from, or how it got there, made us start to think about consciousness, about whether it survives afterlife, and of course, could it be communicated with? Now, everyone is aware of EVPs, and then most people are also aware of ITC, or instrumental transcommunication, which is using electronics to try and get two-way communication. Well, that's what we went after. We had built spirit boxes for about 12 years. My wife and I personally built them. Nothing to sell. We weren't trying to make money for it. It was for research only. And we made improvements on each box. But the one thing we could never improve was we couldn't improve the length of the communication. Spirit boxes would give us maybe a word or two, and then nothing after that. And even with EVP, which is called record and review, when you start a recorder, place it down, and ask questions, you usually stop it, take it home, and then load it to your computer, try to highlight it, try to maybe amplify it, get rid of background noise. Staticom does all of that in real time, meaning that we don't have to do anything. We literally speak, they answer. And today was Staticom 3.0, which we're going to play a couple of clips as to how this has progressed to show how that communication has advanced. When we started with direct radio voice, which most people know from an Italian gentleman named Marcello Bacci, because he used it for about 35 years. He was actually tested by scientists in lab, and they could not understand how he was getting these voices. He was using an old vacuum tube radio, And they even pulled the vacuum tubes one by one until all three of them were pulled, which technically should have rendered the radio unusable as far as radio stations went, and it did. But it didn't stop him from getting responses to the questions that they asked. The only thing they could remove to get the voices to stop were Marcello himself, which also said to us, hey, there is a connection between the operator and the piece of equipment being used. And we've noticed that throughout the years. So when we originally, and this was with our former partners, Ron and Lourdes, that Sheila just mentioned, they had gone back through history and took a real serious look at what types of afterlife communication had been done, what worked, what was proven to be faked or was debunked or not legitimate. Of course, with Marcello Bacci actually being tested in lab with scientists and not being able to be debunked, that's where we started. So we started with DRV, we got it operational, we got it to work. The problem was twofold. The first, from scientists and academia, the first complaint was you're claiming you're getting voices from the other side, but you're using a radio. How do you determine reception from deception? Very valid point. I mean, a radio does exactly that. It takes RF signal in the atmosphere and turns it into speech or music. And if you're claiming I'm getting voices from the other side and your basis for your operation is using radio waves, that's a legitimate point. So first thing we knew we needed to do was remove the radio. The second complaint from science and academia was you're hearing warbles and artifacts of sound, and your brain is trying to pattern recognize those sounds and making you think you're hearing things you're really not. So we knew the second thing that had to be done was that the clarity had to be to a point where if you had 40 people in a room, all 40 of them said, yep, I heard the exact same thing. So that was the path we went down. And we went from direct radio voice, which used a radio, to Staticom, which removed the radio and replaced it with a white noise generator. Now, a white noise generator produces every tone from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. It's basically every sound the human ear can hear. And it plays them all at a spectral frequency of 1, meaning they're all at the same level. So how we believe Staticom works is that when a spirit speaks, and there's no vocal data in white noise, there's no sentences, there's no words, there's no even syllables. None of that exists in white noise. But when a spirit speaks, we believe they cover a couple of those frequency channels within the broadband white noise, which then elevates their voice up, but does not elevate the white noise, which is the process called stochastic resonance. So the voice gets elevated up, and because the white noise is at a spectral frequency of 1, meaning we know what level the white noise is at, we then cut it out, leaving nothing but the vocal. So we no longer have interference from radio. The spirit box theory was that spirits would rearrange the fragments of audio from radio stations and reconfigure them into their own sentences. We determined they didn't need the RF radio signal at all. In fact, when we built spirit boxes for 12 years, that was what was truncating the communication. Every time it hit a radio station, the white noise disappeared and kept them from speaking any further. So now we switched to the white noise generator. And the other problem and concern that we saw was that the speech was coming in so fast that we couldn't mentally comprehend what was being said. You would hear what would have sounded like a syllable. And when we slowed it down, say 50%, it was a sentence or two. And when we realized that, we configured Staticom to slow down the audio 50% in real time, allowing us to hear each and every word said. So I can continue to go on, Sheila, but I'm wondering, just to give them a sample of what we're talking about, what kind of communication we're receiving. Maybe we want to play one of the clips I sent.
Okay.
Why don't we start with the one? I think there's one from Direct Radio Voice, two from Staticom 2.0, and I think two or three from 3.0. So let's start with the one labeled DRV Bocce.
I want to make sure to share sound.
Sure.
Okay. You're not, are you seeing the files on screen?
I am, but I can't quite read them. I think it's,
Okay.
yeah, Bocce short DRV. It's the first one.
Right. Okay.
Marcello, can you see us?
Yes.
Thank you. Marcello, you started this method. It's working. Can you please try to communicate with us?
So that was DRV. But one of the biggest problems we had with it was, would I have loved to have had asked him more questions after that? You bet I would have. But DRV, along with Staticom, and we increased it in Staticom 2.0, but the communication would come in and out and not stay constant. And that was a major concern because, of course, can I prove that was Marcello Bocce? No, I can't. It's just a vocal. I wasn't able to ask any other questions. But the funny thing about that, like I was saying about vocal responses, is even though he was speaking in English, knowing he was an Italian gentleman, you can still hear that territorial accent when he says, "I'd say glad to meet you," in his voice. And that to us was absolutely fascinating. So now let's skip to a 2.0. I think either Chip Patum or Energy of the Mind, either one of those is fine.
Okay. And when I played it, were you able to see the enlarged window?
It wasn't enlarged, but it was easily seeable.
Okay. Okay. Chip Patum.
Can you say Tony? Did you just say Rathman? Yep. So you know who I am. Can I know who you are? Yes, sir. Thank you. Who am I speaking to?
So again, responses with timing and relevance, hopefully enough clarity that you're all hearing what is being said. I can hear it, but of course I've been doing this 15 years without the wording there. And of course, when we run it live, there is no wording. The wording's just put there to help people. Not everyone has the experience to pick it out because they do speak differently. They put pauses in places between words you wouldn't expect it, or even in a word itself. But I asked, because I asked them to say Tony, and then they said my full legal name, Anthony Rathman. I said, okay, you know who I am. Can I know who you are? And they replied, first and last name, I'm Chip Patum. It's Harold Patter. That's incredible to me. Plus, again, on the vocal, you can hear the ageism in their vocal response, but absolutely fascinating. So
you want to play that one again?
sure.
after you've said all that and people can listen for it.
Can you say Tony? Did you just say Rathman? Yep. So you know who I am. Can I know who you are? Yes, sir. Thank you. Who am I speaking to?
So again, to get first and last name, not something that would typically come through a spirit box, but we knew we still had work to do. So we started with asking questions, things like, how do you hear me speak? If I'm human and I have vocal cords, and when I speak, I create physical sound waves in the atmosphere, another human being within 100 yards, 200 yards, when I speak, those vibrations reach their ears, the follicles in their ear vibrate, that vibration gets transferred to a liquid center of the ear, which then begins to vibrate, which then sends it to the brain. The brain says, oh, wait, I got to pay attention to this. This is speech. But if spirit or consciousness is no longer embodied, I want to know, how do you hear me when I talk? And that's this next clip.
How do you hear me speak?
Now, this was an absolutely fascinating answer. For years of doing EVP work, I'd be asking a question, and before I even got close to finish asking, the response would show up on the recorder. And we always wondered, wait, how is that possible? That just answers it. Energy of the mind, meaning they don't need my vocals. So then we tested that. Could I think a question, and does the answer come through? Yes, it did. Could we then also determined that, spirits having a non-locality, they can answer from anywhere. Because people would always ask us, well, after you were done doing a vocal session, did you ever notice any residual energy in the place you were doing it or in your home? No, we never did, because we don't believe they actually had to be physically in the same room to answer. It's the same thing as if I went over and had a cup of coffee with the neighbor and sat for an hour and talked and then got up and left. Yeah. Would I have left residual energy? Could they detect my body heat on the chair? Yeah, they could. But if we had done that like we're doing this show online, I'd leave no physical energy or evidence in the location, which is why we believe we never experienced any. So this all was working great. We were able to ask a few more questions before the vocals would drop off, but they'd still continue to drop off. We knew we had to correct that. When we moved from 2.0 to 3.0, that was fixed, meaning we don't ever lose it. The only time we quit getting responses is if A, they stop talking, or B, we say, okay, we're done. We're going to shut it off. So let's just go to the next clip, which I think is,
I had cancer.
oh, that's still 2.0. Sorry, go ahead and play that though. That's fine.
Do you know how did you die?
So again, a question we have never had answered before that one, where someone literally identified what transitioned them to the other side. They knew they transitioned, they knew they're on the other side, and were able to clearly answer and say, yeah, I had cancer, without any emotional impact or negativity to it. Just clearly, plain as day, I had cancer. That's what put me over on the other side. We thought that was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So now let's jump to 3.0. I think that one, I'm trying to see what that's titled.
Round of testing, fourth round of testing.
Okay, go to the other one first. I think it's responses.
Yeah.
This one, you're not going to hear any scientific based questions. We've got hundreds of them, and we're about, well, we started it, but we're not down far enough in the road because Staticom 3.0 is maybe 5 months old. But what this is going to show is the true two-way communication, which ITC was meant to do. And although this isn't anything of a scientific questioning or, what's life like on the other side, you are going to get to hear exactly how easy it is with this method to two-way communicate back and forth.
Rathman, I heard you say Rathman. Yes. What did you want to say to Roger? It's Tony. Spirits, can you hear me? Yes, okay. That was a loud voice that just answered. What's your name? That's a strange name. How many spirits are here with us right now? A lot? A lot, yeah, that's what I thought you said. Because there's so many of you, is that why all the background chatter? They're talking? Do you have any messages for us? Rathman, I heard that.
So yeah, I mean, we're not talking about one-word answers. We're talking literally two-way communication. That was one example, and I think the last one is a further example of that. I think that the next one we're going to play is the following night. So that was the 4th round. So if we play that one, then you've seen the clips I've submitted.
Right.
Time what? Well, I can hear you when you whisper, you know that, right? Spirits, if you're not familiar with this device is called Staticom. If you heard me say Staticom. That's better.
Now, can you say Staticom for me, please?
All right, Spirits, if you don't want to say Staticom, let's play another game. What am I holding in my hand? Glasses, thank you. Thank you very much. How about pineapple? Can you say pineapple? Oh, perfect, thank you. How come you can't say Staticom like that?
It's one word.
It's one word, Staticom. Have you not been able to talk to humans before? If you can hear me, spirits, say elephant.
Do you know Tony?
It's me. If we use this device to help cold cases, Will you answer the questions? Yeah, sure. You bet. Thank you.
That will help.
That'll help a lot.
So that's an example of the progress from 2.0 to 3.0. I mean, now we're literally talking two-way communication. We've started to go down the road of going back to the scientific question, what's life like, the certain questions that we know they can answer. And when I say that, is that they will tell us things, but there are what we call universal laws, certain things they can't tell us. Because let's face it, we've asked for the Powerball numbers 1,000 times. Absolute dead silence. They cannot affect the life we believe. They cannot affect the life we were put here to learn, to grow, to evolve, and they can't disrupt that. So obviously, if they were to give me the winning Powerball numbers, I'd probably be sitting on my own private island fishing and not doing Staticom work, although technically deep down, I know I still would be. But they're not allowed to give you information that's going to change what you're supposed to be doing here and how you're supposed to be growing and evolving. Now, we took on a theory called analytic idealism. But now quantum physics is starting to mirror the analytic idealism approach, that consciousness is the primitive of life, the ontological primitive, and life is there in consciousness before life. You become a fractal portion of it during life, and you return after. And we believe that. And a lot of the responses and evidence we've gotten show that. The other thing we want to do with it is, I think you heard in that clip, is use it for cold cases. Giving us information from past events is never a concern. So if law enforcement, FBI, whomever is literally at a standstill, to be able to ask questions and get responses. And the reason we know that works, I didn't submit this clip, but my wife and I had a dear friend a month or two ago who was actually shot and murdered. And we ran Staticom and asked, do you know how you passed? Do you know who did it? If you want to see the clip, it is on my Facebook page. It is on my YouTube. It's out there. We weren't going to release it, but then we thought, you know what? If any of this information given, which they gave first and last name of who did it, if any of that came back as being accurate, we wanted to make sure it was out there prior. Now, we can't verify anything at this point yet until information is found and information is released. But that's how we knew that using it for cold cases would probably be a very good idea. So how is this also advanced? Well, we have been pushing scientists to take a look when I can literally have a conversation. Now, those were clips, condensed clips, but some of those conversations lasted 30 minutes, an hour. And we just clipped them so that it didn't take an hour having you have to sit through it. But someone is answering that's not in front of us. To us, that's proof that consciousness has to survive the human body death. And it still has its intelligence, its free will to answer with timing and relevance. And that to us is absolutely amazing. So we want science to take a look. We've reached out to different organizations. I got to do a really nice presentation for the Foundation for Mind Being Research a month or so ago, which was wonderful. I've been in contact with some very high level PhDs through various universities. One of them, the top electrical engineer, he reviewed the components of the system and he said, he only focused on the components, which I totally understand. He doesn't want to touch metaphysical stuff. I get it. But He reviewed the components with me. He said the only component I have a concern about is the white noise generator, because it's in a plastic case that would make it vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. And so he said, metal case that. So we did. I built a brand new white noise generator. We encased it in an electrical metal case made to reject any electromagnetic interference, and tested it to see if we would still get voices. We absolutely did. Then we bought military grade Faraday material and we did some tests. We put it over a playing radio. The radio quit. We put it over a cell phone in conversation. When it was covered, the cell phone quit. When we encased the white noise generator in the metal EMI restrictive case and placed then the entire system under the Faraday material, the voices never stopped. So they're not radio, not satellite, not electromagnetic interference. These voices are coming from another source. So I don't know if you have questions. I don't know what else you want to cover.
I have a question.
Sure.
While everybody else is getting their thoughts together, why do you think they said be careful?
Oh, real easy. When you look at any of the inventions that would change the world, Tesla's transmission of free energy without wires, that was terrible for him. Who wouldn't want to get a hold of this? And the be careful in my mind is to who has access to it? What are they going to use it for? What purposes and intents do they have for the information? You know, anything from governments or rulers spying on other governments and rulers, trying to figure out what they've done, or there's also dangers, you know, anytime you're opening up portals, and I use the word portal, I don't even know if that's the right word, but when you're communicating with the other side, you know, who are we communicating with? Do we know that for sure? No, we don't. We only have vocal data. We can only go off of the questions that we answer, but does that run the risk of maybe something darker being able to come through? Yeah, I think it could. We haven't run into that problem in 15 years, but I think the be careful is stretched to the point where if this really does prove consciousness survives death, that's going to change science. That's going to maybe support religion, but if the answers don't fall in line exactly with every religious context, that's going to change things. It's going to change foundations of what people think and believe, and there are fears in that. I wrote an entire paper on the Staticom blog talking about all the different fears of just letting this freely go out, and does that need to be controlled and monitored to some degree, and all the concerns that can arise from it. So I think that be careful statement is extensive in a variety of ways.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question or something you'd like to say? Christine.
Yeah, so do you foresee a time when this will be available to all of us at one time?
There will be a time. The concern right now is that my wife and I are researchers. And if we were to release it and people are going to say, okay, you know, I got it, I'm not getting the responses you're getting, what am I doing wrong? Okay, if that's 10 people, maybe. If that's 100, 1,000, 10,000, all of our research stops, all of our development stops, and we're just not prepared to do that. Plus, we continue to upgrade, we continue to make advancements, and every advancement we do then would require that advancement to be put out to everybody else, again, requiring 6 months of understanding, training. And so do we plan at some point to have this available to everyone? Yes, because they deserve to have it. We're just not there yet.
When when someone were to use this and they want to say specifically they want to talk to family members and they want to eliminate the negative energies, the possibility, would you suggest like a prayer to the Archangel Michael, or as a precaution? Would that even be?
Those can never hurt. And for years, we did that prior and after. We've gotten so used to it now, though, and knowing it's been 15 years without any concerns, we don't do it on a regular basis anymore. But for somebody starting, yeah, I would highly recommend it. Everything from prayers to amulets and any significant object or statement that brings that faith security to you to feel secure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a phenomenal advancement in spirit communication.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much for bringing this.
You bet. My pleasure.
Sandra was next.
My question might sound a little out there, but can you confuse the spirit world with aliens? Or
That's not a bad question at all. Matter of fact, we get asked that all the time. If they are speaking to me in English, I don't know who they are. I can ask. And 90% of the time, they are spirits, and they will say that. Who am I speaking to? Spirit, consciousness. They've used both words. But would I know if I didn't ask that? If somebody's speaking to me in English, the only complication with it is that if it's extraterrestrial or multidimensional, they would have to have a very clear understanding of us, our environment, and our language. Now, is that possible? Of course it is. If they do, I literally would not know. I can't see them, can't sense them. It's only vocal data. So unless there's something off in their vocal communication or some sort of strange effect within their vocals that don't sound like every other vocal that comes through, I wouldn't know. But if you look at any of scientific studies of people that claim to have been abducted or had encounters, they always say, well, they're speaking to me, but their mouth never moved. But yet I heard everything they said. Okay. If that's telepathy, if energy of the mind, which spirits are claiming is how they hear me speak, that's a form of telepathy, there'd be no reason why they couldn't.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pam.
I'm struck by the fact that you expressed, and rightfully so, the concern that someone might use this malevolently or whatever. I wish that the people working on AI would have the same concern, but correct. I guess not. That was just all I wanted to say. So thank you for.
No, I appreciate that, but you're right. I mean, half that stuff I didn't even think about until we hit 3.0, and the communication was literally back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm like, there could be some wrong use of this. But again, I think that falls more, and you're right, AI can fall in that category as well. But I think that falls into the growth and elevation of humanity as a whole, and doing what's right as humanity. And whether Staticom's out there or not, is that going to change it? Well, let's hope it does.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Tony. I'm thinking that the quality of the communications, I mean, if they're positive, if they're not saying you should do this, you should do that, or giving you negative feedback in any way, that's a pretty good indicator you're dealing with a fairly progressed spirit. And I wonder if it would actually work for people that have nefarious ends in mind. I wonder if spirit would actually even communicate with them. Would they waste their time?
That's an excellent point. And my answer is probably no, because they say energy of the mind, which we believe to be consciousness. They know everything you're thinking. You can't hide anything from them. And we've seen that over and over and over. Even if I walk in thinking, okay, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking this, but in the back of my head, I'm going, okay, don't mention that. They'll know and they'll say it. And so you can't hide your intentions, which is probably a good thing. And I think you're probably right about that.
And also on the other side, that's one of the things that comes through in communications all the time and has for a century and a half or more, is that you can't hide anything there. You know, what you are is, it shows up, you know,
Right.
in your field. So,
Yeah.
and apparently they can still work that way with us because they can read what our thought patterns are and what our intentions are. So,
Correct. And we believe that to be the case because we believe that there's a universal consciousness. When we're embodied in human form, we're a fractional portion of that,
sure.
which is, along the same lines of religion saying, you're all part of God. And whether you use the word God or universal consciousness, whatever that form or energy is, if you're part of it, then yeah, that transmission is going to go back. As we learn, as we live through life here as humans, that information goes back and grows and expands universal consciousness, because if there is a universal consciousness and it didn't grow, it would either collapse or become stagnant. And then that information, I mean, if space is expanding faster than the speed of light, then universal consciousness has to be expanding at a similar rate or collapse would occur.
I agree. Thank you, Tony.
Welcome.
Susan had a question in the chat, and I think you'd mentioned that your wife's friend who was killed gave you information. So I'm presuming that you asked for that person to come through.
Correct.
So Susan is asking, can you contact anyone who has crossed my name?
It's more difficult than just a regular conversation like the ones I played, but can it be done? Absolutely. I've spoken to my grandfather who passed away probably 20 some years ago. I was more than that, man, I'm 50. So 30, 35, 40 years ago.
You're just a kid.
And I spoke with him, and my wife spoke with her mother who passed away 3+ years ago from COVID complications. So absolutely, yes, it can be done. In fact, even when we do public events, people will come up and ask questions, say, hey, can I ask a question? We say, absolutely, go ahead. They'll ask their question, and then we'll see them react and go, that's so-and-so's voice. I recognize it that's their voice. So yeah, it can be done.
Okay. And Gabrielle, your question is one I was just going to ask. So do you want to ask it? She put a question in the chat about Gary Schwartz.
Yeah, I wonder, I don't know, details or anything, but how is it different or similar with Gary Schwartz's soul phone explorations?
Well, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, but I was told that funding quit 6 months ago, and they're no longer, now they're still doing research. But to my also knowledge, the soul phone has never produced any communication at all. The farthest they got, to my understanding, and again, like I said, I could be wrong, was a yes-no device without communication. It would light up yes or no based on the question they asked. So I don't know enough about whether they actually got to any vocals or not.
Yeah, see, my question was, had you been in contact at all with Gary Schwartz?
I have.
So
his response was, because I don't have a PhD. Well, let me rephrase that. We wrote to him, reached out and said, hey, we've got communication. And he never responded. But we saw a response in a publication he put out when somebody else said, hey, there are people out there that are getting full two-way communication. How come you're not merging up? And his answer was, because they're PhD and university, they don't want to mix that training and study with somebody who's not.
That might be what's in their way.
Well, could be.
Yes, very good point. And that's too bad.
It is. And it's, I understand the complexity of peer reviews, and it's very tough at, just from what I understand, not being a PhD myself, I don't live in that world, but I understand the criticism, and the one wrong move and your reputation can get swept under the rug. I get it. But we have a workable system. We have a system that produces two-way communication. But getting science, luckily science has evolved past the classical materialism in a lot of areas, psychology, physics, but there are still those hard few that won't even believe this is true or exists. And I guarantee you there's nothing faked here. This is what I'm showing is as real as it gets.
It's because they're still stuck in the Newtonian paradigm.
Well, very, very, very true. But things like quantum physics, the other theories that are coming out, are all helping shed light that we're seeing a very limited view. Our instrumentation isn't necessarily measuring what the be all end all is, but secondary effects of certain fields changing. And what they're measuring are just those changes in effect, not what reality actually is.
Yeah, I think I may have told this last time because we had Alyssa Beaver here. That was our
Good friend of mine. Yeah.
Yes, I know. And but several years ago, I was in Tucson and I took a tour of their lab. They showed me all the different rooms. Gary was there. He showed me all the different rooms and the different things. Like, they had a great big parabolic microphone, pick up the tiniest sounds, and just all kinds of really expensive equipment. But the one thing that struck me was in this one room, they had a great big screen and a bar graph, and all the bars were all flat. And he said that when spirit is there, the bars will move. And as I stepped into the room, they all shot up to the top. And he said he'd never seen that before. And I said, well, my daughter is a very strong spirit. But there certainly wasn't any kind of communication like you get. But I mean, that was impressive, but it's not enough. That's not going to prove it to somebody on the outside, like hearing voices.
Right. But the fact that he said he's never seen that before, and the second you walked in, it shot up.
Yeah, I mean, he hadn't seen it that high, and they all went way up.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, but I'd love to hear my daughter's voice. That's nothing is going to beat that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people always ask, how can this be, especially usually after the question, the be careful question, I was called, well, how can this be used for good? Well, one, cold cases, definitely. Two, relief from grief. I mean, there is no more calming effect than to get a message, to recognize a voice and go, oh my gosh, that's them. And then have them say, I'm still here, I'm still around, you will see me again. That can bring real comfort because grief is painful, difficult, and can last a lifetime. Mm-hmm. Something like this can shed some real light on that, and hopefully also some understanding of, science still battles and has battled from day one, whether consciousness exists inside the body or outside. And this, to me, is clear indication that it's outside, or there'd be no answers coming through. So, one step at a time, baby steps, and let's see what comes from it.
And it seems to me you made that giant leap for mankind.
Yeah.
On the moon.
Well, not even just for mankind, but for consciousness as a whole. I mean, people would always say to me, did the spirits ever help designing this? Oh, yeah. I have clip after clip where they're telling me, I mean, I have one clip I remember saying, okay, up or down, because I was adjusting. And not only did they respond, they responded with a number. I didn't even say there were numbers on it. They told me exactly where to put it. And to this day, that setting has not moved because it was right on.
Yeah, oh, I see you got a heart coming up from So, who's across the world from us.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yes. So have you found Chip Padam? Any evidence?
We researched it immediately. The two concerns were that one, we're only dealing with audio only. Did I spell it? Did I hear it right?
Well, yeah.
Did I spell it right? Were there hidden consonants or silent consonants in the name? I doubt it. Padam and Patter, probably not. But it was still 2.0. I couldn't ask, I never got to ask any questions after that. Who was president when you transitioned? What year were you born? Or what year did you so I didn't have enough information. And Padam and Patter are pretty common names. So
and Chip is probably a nickname anyway.
Chip is probably a nickname.
Yeah.
So that made it difficult. But hopefully 3.0 will solve that and allow us to get more detailed information. But again, we got to go back to what my wife and I called universal laws, meaning there's only so much information they can give us. They're not going to disrupt this life that we're here to live, and we know that. And so we have to manipulate when we ask questions and push the boundaries. Now, have we pushed those boundaries? We had a woman one night answering every question we asked, which we were thrilled. But then we heard other voices come in. Don't tell them that. Stop. You have to stop. And then that went on for 15, 20 seconds. And then we heard a voice come in and go, we had to remove her because she was telling us stuff we weren't supposed to know.
I think that kind of answers Gabrielle's next question. I wonder if you could ask Spirit how they would answer requests for nefarious purposes. So,
yeah, that I would say that would fall right in that lines. That depending on if we gave specific questions along those lines or just generic, but generic they might answer. If I just said, "Can you answer?" I may get a response, but if I asked one, I probably would hear crickets, absolute silence.
I bet if you solve a cold case, you'll be getting inundated with requests.
Probably. But then there's other questions too. How were the pyramids built? In fact, we did a live session on a podcast Sunday night, and I did ask that on online. And I got to go back and review it. I've gotten about halfway through it, not the end half, and this was at the end. But I asked, were these built by man or extraterrestrials? And 3 of us heard them say alien. Now, whether that's accurate or not, I can't verify, but we're going to go back and review that portion of it yet. But did Atlantis exist? There's a million questions I could spend the rest of my life asking just to see what response I get. But the neat thing about the system is that what we can research, about 94 and 95% of it is 100% accurate. There was, when we first got 3.0 operational, my wife said to me, it was up and running. My wife said to me, I don't feel good. I'm in pain. And I said, really? I said, what's wrong? She goes, I'm in terrible pain in my stomach. And so I said to Staticom, I said, is my wife getting sick? They said, yeah, probably. I said, what should she take? And then this word came through, and I don't even react to it because I didn't know what the word was. The word was Percodan. And when I went to look it up, Percodan is a prescription strength pain reliever, a combination of oxycodone and aspirin, which is for severe pain. They were right on. I didn't even know what that word was.
Yeah. Gary, did you have something? Because I looked like you unmuted. No? Okay. Yeah, Gabrielle?
Yeah, Tony, I wonder, because I wasn't here from the beginning, what inspired you and inspires you, or what inspired you originally to start this research and do this project with your wife?
Well, originally it was my wife because 15 years ago, I didn't believe any of this. My father was a physics instructor, so every question I asked got a scientific answer. I said, Dad, why is the sky blue? Well, the sky's blue because there's water vapor in the air. When the sun hits the water vapor, blue's the most reflective color, and that makes the sky look blue. Nothing about consciousness, spirit, that wasn't a regular discussion point. So it was when I met my wife that she was into all this. She wanted to go ghost hunting. And that's when I was explaining that we got these voices when I took her, that I couldn't explain. Where were these coming from? How did they show up on the recorder? It fascinated me, and I couldn't debunk it. Spent months trying to debunk it, couldn't do it. And that's when I said, okay, we're going to run some tests. Let's build some of these machines. Let's see what kind of evidence we get. And it just kept growing from there. And now we've got it to a point where not only do they respond, but we can have long-winded two-way communication. So that's how it started.
Yeah. So it seems in a way your father's scientific answers were still helpful.
Oh, without a doubt, helpful. In fact, some of the toughest questions I've ever been asked haven't come from interviews like this, or they came from him. Wait a minute, you're telling me that, this or that, how does this happen? And I'm like, well, but yeah, so it did help. Absolutely, it did.
Yeah. So you were preparing without knowing it for this.
For a lot of things. I mean, I worked in an electronic shop when I was younger, fixing TVs and radios in the 80s. Never thought that would be put to use for something, but it's being put to use now.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you.
And Tony, your story about your wife reminds me of a meme I posted today. It says, a wise man once told his wife nothing because he was a wise man.
There's some truth to that too.
Okay, Susan, you're next, and then Gary.
Maybe a little off topic, but may I ask where you get the funding from to do this sort of research?
All from myself. It's all self-funded.
Is more funding needed for you to be more advanced in it?
Of course. I mean, that's a subject matter we haven't even thought to go down yet. The one thing, first step we're hoping for is that any consciousness, scientific, which is why we made the changes of shielding the white noise generator, because the professor said, take this low-hanging fruit out, and then I believe science will take it seriously. So we did that. But the next step is to get somebody, an organization, a consciousness organization, a scientific organization, to look at it. I mean, we're researchers. So if there is something we missed and they can say, you're getting this, not what you think you're getting, we want to know. We've gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, though, and don't believe that to be the case. So yes, we'd like them to look at it and say, you know what, we can't answer it. We don't know how this is happening. Or at least test it like Bocce was, to the point where they're like, we don't know. Then that validates it enough to have it be pushed to the next step. But yeah, every step after that, of course, is additional research, additional maybe university backing to be able to put it through the tests it needs to be put. And of course, funding is always attached to that as well.
But then you run the risk of losing control over it.
Well, that is a fact as well. But this was never about control. This was more about literally trying to put some kind of proof on the table that consciousness survives outside of the body. And although there's NDE studies, there's, all sorts of, Robert Bigelow did 202 essays on it and gave away $500,000 for it, which I believe went to Jeffrey Mishlove. But some great evidence in there. But for us, we wanted proof for ourselves that, yes, not only does it exist, but that I can communicate with them. And now we're there. So next steps, there's a lot of them, but it'll depend on more than just my wife and I doing it. It'll depend on people to say, okay, we're ready to take a look at this. That's what we're waiting for.
Spirit will make it happen. Go ahead, Gary.
Well, I just wanted to thank Tony. I've got to sign off, but it's good to see you again, my friend. And
good to see you too, Gary.
Keep up the work. It's great. And we'd like to have you back.
Anytime.
We'll do that sometime soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much for tonight.
Good
My
to see
pleasure.
you, Gary. Okay.
Tony, may I just say this? This might not be the right platform, but if funding is something that would advance this, I'd be interested.
That is good to know. There's so many things. There's so many other tests we want to do. Like, I don't have access to what's called a Faraday room. I mean, we've done all the EMI shielding. We've done Faraday material, but they make rooms that literally do not allow any signal. And then, that's one of the things we'd like to do. We'd like to be able to take the entire method into one of these rooms with me in the room as well, operating it, and see that we're still getting everything we're getting. And I'm sure we would. But then there's just so many other things after it. There's people always ask, is this portable? Well, we changed it from this huge computer system down to portability. I mean, we're going to Canada to give a presentation on it at the Halifax Paranormal Symposium. We're going to Phenomicon in September to not only talk about it, but demonstrate it live. And that will get more notice of it as well. But I appreciate that more than you know. Once we've opened up a door to whether that's a NASA scientist or a consciousness organization that says, yeah, we'd love to look at it. We did have one conscious mind organization in California. The PhD professor said, I would love to look at this. You don't happen to have the money for the funding though, do you? And I said, well, what are we talking? And he goes, well, minimum of 50 grand. And I'm like, no, I don't have that with what's gone in this already over the years. No, I don't.
But that's not a lot of money really these days.
Well,
that would be hard to get together.
It's not. That was their starting point to be able to say, okay, we're going to start evaluating this. And I couldn't have been more appreciative from his offer, but he said, we're a nonprofit organization. I understand that most are. And unfortunately, as sad as it is, money makes the world go round. But this is something that I think can turn every level of science to theology to physics. I mean, however this information is coming through, literally I ask a question and the answer is there. Can that change internet speeds? Is this a new method to send information without wires and cables and fiber optics that, who knows? I don't have all those answers, but those are all questions that come up.
Is that organization in the LA area?
It is.
Because some years ago, without going into the long story, a friend and I were going to put on an event for Gary Schwartz as a fundraiser, and that didn't work. But, that's something that I would be happy to work with you if you ever decide to do that.
Good to know.
I mean, we're not talking about a lot of money, but, there's enough people in the LA area that are interested.
You know what? I mean, we are looking for, we've got some promising things in the works. How they'll fall out, we don't know yet because things can change at a flip of a dime. But glad to know that information. I mean, we literally want this evaluated beyond what we've done. Third-party reviews, third-party questioning, and third-party testing to go, oh my gosh, they're right or they're wrong. And if we are wrong, we want to know it, but I don't believe we are.
Where are you located?
Phoenix, Arizona.
I'm going to Phoenix in 2 weeks.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Unfortunately, I'm leaving for Wisconsin in, what is today? Wednesday. So we're leaving.
I get there on
I'm
the
leaving
15th.
Tuesday.
I'm there the 15th. I'm going up to Sedonia. I'm there the 15th through, I think, the 19th.
Oh, that's very cool. Love Sedona. Just a great area and great energy there.
Yes.
I sent you a message, a chat on the chat. Thank you,
All right.
thank you, thank you.
Okay. And I don't think I have your email address, but I could get it from you off Facebook, whatever.
I can send it to you. I'll just
Yeah.
Facebook
My phone got wiped and I don't know whose address I have anymore. So I
it.
yours didn't. Anyway,
Phones are great when they work. When they don't, it becomes
yes,
a big problem.
that's for sure. Pam, you have the last question.
It's for you, Sheila. Sheila, where's Gary located?
Tucson.
Gary?
In Tucson.
Yeah, U of A.
I just think it's interesting that they're so close.
No,
I
Gary's
said the
not
same
there.
thing. I said the
No.
same thing when I wrote to him. I said, I am not more or less. I'm less than 2 hours from you. Give me 15 minutes just to let me, and no
Oh,
response.
you're talking about Gary Schwartz. So is
I
that what
am,
you're talking
I
about?
am, because
Yeah.
indeed,
Yeah, he's in Tucson.
if his funding got cut off, it probably got cut off because of lack of progress. So you would think somewhere in there,
I'm gonna
all egos aside, not saying the